Is the Bank of Canada independent or is it not?
One thing I know is that Canadian interest rates are much lower than American interest rates. They're lower because this country's fiscal situation is strong, because this government has a plan to grow this economy.
The Bank of Canada is ignoring their mandate, and their mandate is up for review in 2026. But what the is the point in talking about a mandate that is constantly ignored anyway? And something came up that I thought was absolutely hilarious. Pierre Poilievre actually noticed what happened on the Bank of Canada's website, and you've got to see this if you haven't seen it.
Something is missing from the Bank of Canada's main webpage. You see, they had this mission statement at the top of the page that was there for 20 years, and it read the following: "We are Canada's central bank. We work to preserve the value of money by keeping inflation low and stable."
And it's been over a week since Pierre Poilievre put out this video, and guess what, guys? The Bank of Canada still has not changed the message on their website, because what is clear is they don't give a shit. Because interestingly enough, the mandate for the Bank of Canada is up for review, and they recently said in Mexico City some interesting things about how they look at monetary policy. And guess what? It is not using the lens that they should be and using the metrics that they say that they follow when they don't, which we'll get into. So as part of the bank's 5-year framework renewal process with the federal government, McClem stressed that the bank will not abandon its 2% inflation target and discussed moving away from traditional base case economic models toward a scenario-based decision making. And they've already done this, because they were talking about scenario 1 and scenario 2 with the tariffs. I talked about it on this channel.
The economy's in a year-long recession in scenario 2. We've calibrated the response that I would call it a serious recession. It's a 4-quarter recession. It'll be painful.
And even more recent than that, they were asked during a press conference why they're abandoning targeting inflation. Because when you look at where core inflation is right now, it's at 2.6%. Their target is 2%. And if you look at the CPI median, it's at 3.1%. And they love the CPI median. I'm not saying I love this. This is what they go by. And it's at 3.1%, which probably means it's at 6.2% at least, because you can double these numbers. And then you look at the trimmed mean, which again is something that they look at like a hawk. Guess what? It's at 3%, which is basically 6%. You've got to double these numbers because they're so far-fetched from the truth. So guess what? They've already abandoned their 2% inflation target, because what they've been doing is cutting into this. And take a listen to this clip from the press conference when a reporter questions the Bank of Canada on it.
You are cutting interest rates, as you say, with core inflation at 3%, the top of your band. You're also looking at wider measures, and you say that those are 2.5%. Given how upset Canadians were when inflation jumped after the pandemic, aren't you taking some kind of a risk here with inflation pressures?
Well, Greg, I do want to underline that, as you said, Canadians remain concerned about the cost of living, and our primary mandate is to maintain low, stable inflation, and we are very focused on that. I mean, total inflation is 1.9%. It's been running slightly below 2% since April, largely as a result of the elimination of the consumer carbon tax. If you look at, trim and median are running around 3%. As I indicated in response to Paul's question, if you look at the more recent monthly readings, they're running around, if you look at like the 3-month moving average, it's about 2.5%. And if you look at a range of other core measures, you look at like traditional exclusion measures, CPI-X food and energy, CPI-X, they're sort of 2.4, 2.6. At this point, inflationary pressures look a little more contained. We don't want Canadians to have to worry about big increases in the cost of living.
So where is this pressure coming from? Is the Bank of Canada independent or is it not? Well, it's not independent because you've only got to look at the data, which actually comes from the government. So it's far from independent. And then you've got to look how the government is cheering that the Bank of Canada has cut rates, which actually means the economy is really shit. Take a listen to this.
Mr. Speaker, I know many things. I know many
Nothing.
things. And one of the things I know, the member opposite, the leader of the opposition, just mentioned interest rates. One thing I know is that Canadian interest rates are much lower than American interest rates. They're lower because this country's fiscal situation is strong.
So he's saying there that interest rates are lower, and that's a good thing. Interest rates are lower than the United States. This is great. But actually, that's a reflection of the economy, and the economy is doing really shit. So once again, you've got this so-called expert, an actual central bankster who is in charge now in Canada, and this is how broken his view is on the economy. So you have no hope really when you've got these mainstream economists which believe the same thing who are also in charge. And the Bank of Canada, they're just more than a bank. They're a central bank. They're no longer targeting inflation and stable money. They just make it up as they go along just based on the political pressure that they're under. And it's very interesting because it says right here, CPI median, CPI trim, they're both above 3%. So that means, like I said, they're likely over 6% in reality and probably 9%, probably 10% in reality. And they're cutting rates into that. And yes, the economy is really so we understand why they are cutting rates. But if you look at it through the lens of the Bank of Canada, they should not be fucking cutting rates right now. And that's what I'm trying to say. They don't even follow their own fucking rules, their own indicators. That is how broken these institutions are. And it's the same in the United States. It's the same in the UK as well. They don't really have a clue what they're doing because they have this broken view on how money is created and how the economy works. And then in this article, what's really interesting is it shares basically about how they talked about real estate. Real estate might become more of a target in the Bank of Canada's future framework. But once again, this is much ado about nothing, because even if the Bank of Canada has to target real estate in some broken way, they will just change it depending on whatever they think is going on at that time.
It'll be painful.
Depending on the political pressures that they're under. Because if you look at rates that are coming down right now, and then their metrics are saying inflation is high, well, what also is going on? The government is spending at a massive deficit, and that is likely to increase even more. So by dropping rates even lower, it means that the government's borrowing, at least on the short end, is much, much cheaper. So it's interesting because when you look at long bonds in Canada as well, they are screaming how shit the economy is, and the Bank of Canada really doesn't lead. They follow what happens in the bond market. But it's incredibly interesting what you're having going on with the politics and the Bank of Canada right now.
First of all, the governor of Bank of Canada, you have to lower these damn interest rates. It's driving me crazy. You keep saying we get inflation below 2%, we'll lower them. Well, we're at 2.75%.
Because it's showing that these institutions are really joined at the hip. And whether people realize that or not is another cup of tea.
Would you like a cup of tea?
Yeah, sure.
But when you look at the data that they are fed, it's not coming from independent institutions. It's coming from the government. So that data is incredibly broken and manipulated because the government, they're not really good at doing much, because the government's data, it really isn't that good to begin with or that accurate. So what's going to be really interesting moving forward now is how the Bank of Canada reacts as more and more it becomes the focal point of the general public, that obviously policy is becoming more about politics and less about what they actually say is their target, which is low and stable inflation and stable money.
Well, Greg, I do want to underline that, as you said, Canadians remain concerned about the cost of living. And our primary mandate is to maintain low, stable inflation. And we are very focused on that.
Because money has been far from stable over the past 10 years. And what are the consequences of the ups and downs of that? Zero. You have the same governor. You have the same bullshit going on. You have the same broken economic view and nothing ever fucking changes. So it's no wonder that they're always miles behind the curve on what is going on. And don't get me wrong, they might be right about cutting rates. And in fact, I think they are, because the reason why is inflation is going to be coming down significantly more and more. You're going to see, at least on the stuff people don't want to buy because they can't afford it, because they're fucking broke. Meanwhile, the stuff that they do want to buy, food, shelter, guess what? That will continually go up in price. And that is the major dilemma and situation that they're going to have to face. And they don't even know it's going on, and that's the laugh of it. If you've enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN, also want to help protect your privacy and help the channel at the same time, go to ExpressVPN, link below. It's the VPN that I use, and it also helps out the channel. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.